Welcome to Business First Africa with Ashwin Mbedi. We've got a lot of interesting updates for you today, including Botswana and Zimbabwe moving to scrap passports for travel between the two countries. Botswana pushing ahead with the hemp and cannabis industry. Then we look at South Africa with an update showing that Zimbabwe remains South Africa's biggest buyer of maize. Namibia's president heads to the fishing industry in Walvis Bay. That and so much more on the show that doesn't just focus on business for business's sake. We focus on business because it's life. Welcome to the show. Now, Africa's domestic capital has risen beyond $4 trillion. Yet this expansion is not translating into large-scale job creation or industrial growth, according to a report by the Africa Finance Corporation. The study identifies weak financial intermediation and poor capital allocation as central constraints, noting that much of the continent's financial resources are locked in low-risk assets instead of being directed into productive sectors such as infrastructure and manufacturing. The report argues that the challenge is no longer the availability of capital, but its deployment, with bank assets, pension funds, insurance pools, and sovereign capital failing to generate sufficient employment or industrial output. It highlights a structural imbalance where African economies export raw materials while importing finished goods, effectively shifting job creation abroad and exposing domestic markets to imported inflation. Looks like Africa's got a lot of homework to do with regards to the management of its resources in a way that creates sustainable jobs. We'll be keeping an eye on Africa, as we always do. Now we swing over to Botswana, where we have our correspondent Rorisang Mohojwe reporting on Botswana and Zimbabwe planning to scrap passports for travel to ease travel and trade between the two countries.
Thank you very much, Ashwin. Now, this proposal was confirmed during the 5th Botswana-Zimbabwe Binational Commission, which was held in Harare, Zimbabwe, attended by both Presidents Duma Boko and Emmerson Mnangagwa. Now, officials say that this plan will be supported by harmonized immigration systems, as well as one-stop border posts and digital clearance platforms, as well as improved facilitation for traders. However, it currently remains at an early stage and is going to require some legal reform as well as technological systems to be put in place before it can be implemented. Now, President Boko has noted both at the commission and right here at home that Botswana is currently developing advanced digital identity solutions, and these include smartphone accessible national IDs in order to smoothen cross-border movement. Now, a few years ago, President Mokgweetsi Masisi also spoke of such an agreement to take place between Botswana and Zimbabwe, following the same system to be implemented between Botswana and Namibia. And now President Duma Boko has signed or inked this deal with President Emmerson Mnangagwa to have citizens of both countries travel between the two countries using only national IDs instead of passports. And officials say that this move actually forms part of broader efforts by the two countries, the two neighboring countries, to strengthen trade as well as cooperation, alongside several other agreements that were put in place on defense, security, and investment.
We live in a fluid, very dangerous world now. World of uncertainty. World of might being right, where the international legal order is being subverted every day and disorder is normalized and given the imprimatur of authority. We face these challenges. And sometimes as African countries, we think we are helpless. We are not. We hold some of the aces. In fact, we hold some of the most important aspects needed for this world to survive. We are endowed with natural resources The African continent is rich, by far the richest continent on the face of the earth. It has young people. The median age, the average population is 19 years, 3 months on the African continent. A continent of 1.4 billion people, over 60% of them being young people, full of youthful energy, marauding, bristling with purpose. And we are a poor continent? No, we cannot be. And we have natural resources in staggering abundance and variety. How can we be poor? And how can we go out to the world as beggars, as weaklings, asking them to give us a seat at the table at the United Nations? No, we must break into that organization and claim our seat at the head of the table. I make these remarks forcefully and evocatively because they must represent the new thinking, the new Chimurenga across the breadth and dimensions of the African continent. And so we are here to continue to mark the steps, to chart a course, to script a new and refreshingly different, defiant, powerful narrative for Africa.
Now, following the steps of South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Malawi, Botswana now wants to push ahead with the hemp and cannabis industry. Here is yet another update with Rorisang Mohojwe.
Well, as you may recall, Ashwin, Botswana is the new kid on the block after having recently legalized the cultivation of hemp for medicinal and industrial purposes late last year through the Boko administration for economic diversification purposes. Now, currently, authorities are saying that key legal as well as regulatory frameworks are now in place to govern production as well as processing and export, and the country is fast becoming well positioned to compete in this global sector. Now, 2 companies have already been licensed and they have started running pilot projects in collaboration or in partnership with the National Agricultural Research and Development Institute, and they are supported as well by the Botswana University of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Now, government says it has also secured a piece of land in the central district of the country for commercial cultivation, and that development work is already in progress ahead of full-scale production. Our officials say that the crop's short growth cycle and expanding uses, particularly the CBD in pharmaceuticals and wellness, actually present very strong economical potential to create jobs as well as boost exports and support local enterprises. We do understand that a high-level Botswana delegation recently in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, visited a cannabis farm in order to benchmark Zimbabwe's progress as well as explore opportunities for collaboration within this sector, which, like I said, Botswana is a new kid on the block, but it is pushing ahead with plans to advance hemp as well as medicinal cannabis industry in the country.
Wandile Sihlobo, South Africa's presidential envoy on agriculture and land and chief economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber, highlighted that Zimbabwe accounted for 38% of South Africa's 1.95 million tons of maize exports in the 2025 to 2026 marketing year as of 17 April. Now, despite overall exports likely falling short of the 2.4 million ton forecast due to softer global demand, Zimbabwe continues to stand out as the most consistent and valuable regional buyer. Here is Wandile speaking from his X account.
Zimbabwe remains one of the most reliable maize markets for South Africa. Take, for example, their current marketing year. That's the 2025-26 marketing year. That's the year that ends now in April. And of course, from May, we start the 2026-27 marketing year. In the current year, we have now so far exported about 1.9 million tons of maize as South Africa. That's white and yellow maize. And Zimbabwe accounts for about 38% of those maize exports. The majority of maize that Zimbabwe imported from South Africa is white maize, but there's also a part of that is yellow maize, which they use in their animal feed production side. We have exported also to a number of markets like Botswana, Lesotho, and the whole range of the neighboring countries. But Zimbabwe remains the most reliable market for South Africa. Outside of the African continent, there are a number of countries that we export to. We export, for example, to the likes of South Korea, Taiwan, Venezuela, Vietnam. Those are some of the markets that South Africa has exported maize to. And even in this current marketing year, there are bits of maize that went to all of these countries. In the past, the Far East markets, your likes of South Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam used to be the major buyers of the South African maize. But this year, they've not been as active in importing maize from South Africa. Part of the reason for that, I think, is because there's just so much maize in the world market. So the demand is pretty much soft. They've been able to get cheaper maize from various markets, and they didn't have to actually come and import some of this maize from South Africa. But of course, as South Africa, we always pride ourselves with the fact that the quality of the maize out of South Africa, it's dried in the sun, and it tends to be that good quality. But this time around, still, we just did not enjoy that much demand from these countries, to an extent that when the season started in May last year, we thought that by the end of April, South Africa would be able to export about 2.4 million tons of maize. But so far, we've only exported about 1.9 million tons of maize. That's, of course, as of April 17. And I think that for the next week or so, we're not going to be able to actually export that much maize to meet the target that we had of 2.4 million tons of maize. So the two key messages then that I want to put forward here is that we will likely miss our initial target of 2.4 million tons of maize. If anything, we will be just above 2 million tons of maize, because if there are 2 or 3 shipments that go out, we will be able to just cross the 2 million ton of maize. And the second part is that Zimbabwe remains a reliable buyer of the South African maize. Of course, the reason in the African continent they remain the major buyer of their maize is, of course, just the size and the demand that they typically have, we experience there, but also the fact that Zimbabwe is one of the countries that have embraced importing genetically modified maize. About 80% of the South African maize is GM. A number of countries that would also be at those levels, like Zimbabwe, at the likes of Kenya and the others, but they still have a ban on the imports of GM maize. So we still face some constraints in accessing the Kenyan markets and many others. And I hope that in the coming years, they will reevaluate that policy so that they can be able to buy the affordable maize out of South Africa. But we also want to ensure that over time, Zimbabwe themselves, they can be able perhaps maybe to explore the planting of some of these seed cultivars that South Africa enjoys, so that they can also be able to reap the yields that we are able to get here in South Africa. But I think the core message here is that when we are thinking about the maize exports to the world market, Zimbabwe is not only an important market from an African perspective, but just globally now, it has become that important market for South Africa, as we see that the demand in the Far East has been quite soft, especially this year that we are ending now, the 2024-25-26 marketing year in maize in South Africa.
Now, at the 12th African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, ARFSD 12 in 2026, Uganda's Prime Minister, retired Honorable Robina Nabanja, urged African nations to develop new and innovative financing strategies. She stressed the need to shield the continent from external economic shocks while advancing the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2063 through enhanced domestic resource mobilization, private investment, and regional integration. Have a look.
With only 4 years and 8 months remaining to 2030, we must move with urgency from commitments to concrete and measurable results. We must leverage science, technology, and innovation. Regional integration is very important. Innovative financing and strong partnerships. And these platforms remain critical for ensuring that Africa's priorities, especially in financing, climate action, and sustainable development, are fully reflected in the global decision making. As we accelerate implementation, it is important that we strengthen the key enablers of transformation. In particular, we must prioritize investment in transport and logistic infrastructure to unlock regional connectivity and intra-Africa trade, ensure reliable and affordable energy to power industrialization and innovation, and decisively reduce the cost of doing business, like I've already told you, to attract investment and support private sector growth. As we hand over the chairmanship, I wish to encourage member states to prioritize the following. 1, the nexus between peace and sustainable development. Number 2, the need to take full advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Number 3, the need to strengthen enablers of development.
East African countries are discussing plans for a joint oil refinery at Tanzania's port of Tanga, modeled on Nigeria's Dangote refinery, according to Kenyan President William Ruto. The region currently imports all refined petroleum products, mainly from the Middle East, exposing it to supply disruptions and price increases. Ruto said the refinery would process oil from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Kenya, South Sudan, and Uganda, positioning it as a shared regional project. Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, who attended the conference, said he could replicate his 650,000 barrels per day Nigerian refinery in East Africa if governments support the initiative with a proposed timeline of 4 to 5 years. Uganda has also announced plans to build a refinery, including a 2024 agreement with Alpha MBM Investments for a 60,000 barrel per day plant. Dangote added he plans to establish about 20 fertilizer blending plants across Africa by 2028 and encouraged African investors to participate, saying dividends would be paid in dollars. Now, President William Ruto spoke on shared investment in pipelines and in refineries. President Museveni says a refinery in Uganda is actually profitable, and Aliko Dangote commits to building a similar refinery in East Africa. Here are the three gentlemen speaking at that conference.
Kenya Pipeline, because we wanted to unlock the value of Kenya Pipeline and use it for the transformation of the country. President Museveni called me and said, I want to buy 50% of Kenya Pipeline. And he told me, I don't care the price. You know, that's how serious he was. When some other pessimists in Kenya were saying, oh, you know, the price is very high, I don't know. You know, President Museveni could see beyond the price. He could see the opportunity of transforming our nation, our region together. Mzee, I want to assure you that the same way you invested in Kenya Pipeline, Kenya is going to invest in your refinery and in the future of our resources together. And hopefully we can bring all the other countries in our region to see the value, not in the short-term benefit you get from something cheap from somewhere else, but in the benefit of building something for the future that will not only earn you money today, but earn you opportunities.
I can give commitment to the two presidents that were here. If they will support the refinery, we'll build the identical one that we have in Nigeria, 650,000 barrels.
So the discussions are still early, though, but the three of you, it seems like you're trying to make this work.
It will work. Definitely. There's nothing that can stop it. We have done the one in Nigeria, and that's why we are taking the bold move, which we have started already. Piling has started. We are building that one to a scale. 1.4 million barrels a day will give us will be the largest refinery in the world. That's number one. Number two, will have 10% of the entire United States of America's refining capacity. And this is coming with a lot of, petrochemicals. And if you look at it today in Nigeria, if not because we have polypropylene, all the plants, all the businesses would have collapsed because cement is packed in polypropylene, flour, rice, grains, everything. So nothing. And the cost now has shot up between just 45 days from $900 a ton to $3,000. There's no way you can afford it. So that is why we must learn how to build self-sufficiency. Right now, we have big financial institutions that are very hungry for big ticket items. And we are also big in terms of our own vision. Before, there's nothing that, any one of us will sit down and say, no, I want to build something like, when Samaila was heading our finance long time ago, this was 2003, 2004, 2005, we were even paying 44% interest rate in Nigeria. We had to go to IFC to raise money. Was our first loan abroad was 478 million. And this thing can be done. 478 million. Samaila gave them a calculation that, okay, we need 3 years loan. They said, no, you guys, you don't know what you are talking about. You need 7 years. 2 years moratorium, 5 years payment. We said, okay, we agree because we are desperate for the money. When we took that money, we paid it back before the expiration of the moratorium, which is 18 months. 24 months, but we paid the money back in 18 months. So it is possible. Africans can do it. Let us not be scared. Let them not come and convince us that, no, somebody needs to carry our raw material to go and produce and bring the items here. I must really thank President of Uganda for taking this bold move. Stopping the export, they will be forced. They will come and produce. Why do you want to take the raw material, then you bring it back? We too, we have educated people. We have big financial institutions. It's not like before. Things have changed.
Thank you for joining us on Business First Africa today. We are going to be closing off with this segment, Brave and Building. But do make sure you catch us same time, same place next week on DSTV 285, GoTV 25, 1up2.com and ntvafrica.my.na. Because for us, it's never just business, it is life. So, Brave and Building in Namibia. President Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah described Namibia's fishing industry as a strategic national asset during an engagement in Walvis Bay, emphasizing the need for sustainable management for the benefit of all citizens. Now, during her visit to Walvis Bay, the president was introduced to Seawork Fish Processors' fully integrated operation, spanning catching, processing, and export of seafood. The company also prioritizes skills development, as well as meaningful participation and inclusion of youth and women in the fisheries value chain. This footage belongs to the Namibian presidency.
Really capture it all. And that's why I said you have started talking to us before you start talking because of this. I must really say that this catchword tells us a lot. We are glad to see what you are doing here as you presented it to us, and we can't really afford to waste more time before we see the real work on the floor. We cannot eat all our fish. That is non-finished.
a small monk. And once we are done with it, it becomes a monk tail. This is blue nose. Are you back home? Because most of the bigger bike like this one, we open up, we make fillets, we say mistake. Then it's cooked, ready to eat. We also do for Canada a vacuum packed product. They are just as you can see the inside. We also have 3 monk vessels of our own. Go out and catch monk. The other 5, they are catching